Welcome to the mbaMission podcast, where every week we discuss different MBA application components and give our expert guidance on everything business school admissions related.
Hi, I'm Harold Szymanski, Senior Consultant here at mbaMission with the mbaMission podcast. And today my guest is my colleague, Nisha Trivedi. Hi, Nisha.
Hi, Harold. How are you doing?
Doing well. I'm going to start off with congratulations. I was at Poets and Quads, and I was looking at your profile, and you have 100 5-star reviews. Congratulations.
Thanks so much, Harold. Appreciate that.
No, of course. And listen, everyone who listens to our podcast, watches our podcast, go take a look at Nisha's reviews. They're fantastic. And that's been my experience as well. We're colleagues here. And I will frequently reach out to Nisha to help me with different essays, help me do different questions, all at the different schools. So thank you for being here, Nisha. Really excited to have a conversation today. So one thing that you have really gotten to know quite well is the program called the Consortium. Could you just give us a little bit of background on what that is and who should consider it and just how it plays into the whole MBA admissions game?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So for the Consortium, for people who might not be familiar, it's an organization whose mission is to address the underrepresentation of certain groups in business to really bring about diversity and inclusion. And specifically, they focus on uplifting the interests of African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Latinos, and Native Americans in all aspects of business. And so the Consortium has basically a method through which candidates can apply to be considered for membership and have access to a network of companies and professionals, as well as fellowships. And in order to be eligible for Consortium, in order to be a strong candidate, candidates who are applying to full-time MBA programs can apply through Consortium and will be considered strong candidates if they have supported the Consortium's mission. So whether that's within work, outside of work, in their academic life, basically if they've made contributions to the community in a way that benefits one of the three target groups of the Consortium. Again, that's African Americans, Hispanic Latinos, and Native Americans. And so there could be many ways they do that.
As you say that very quickly, do the people who received either Consortium fellowship or can apply through the program, did they themselves have to be members of that group? Or is it simply a question of how they have contributed to those communities maybe?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, Harold. And the answer is no, they do not themselves have to be a member of one of those groups. But what is required is that the work that they have done, again, in their professional, personal, or academic life, has benefited one or more of those groups. That is the important part. But I've actually worked with a lot of Consortium applicants, and some of those who have gotten fellowships or invitation to membership were not actually part of one of those groups. So entirely possible.
No, that makes sense. So just to understand the process a little bit more, as far as, okay, if I say whether I'm a member of that group or whether I've just been committed to these issues, I'm like, this sounds really cool. Like, what happens next? What sort of things should I do?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of applying through Consortium, the one thing I always tell people to do is, start with their website, cgsm.org, and it'll show the instructions for applying through the Consortium, as well as the member schools that participate in the Consortium. So you'll just want to check to see, the business schools that I want to apply to, are they on this list, right? And many of them are. And so, if they are, then you can check out, the deadlines and the essays that you'll be required to complete. So basically, the application is generally released in mid-August, and then the deadlines tend to be, there's two deadlines, and you'll have to pick one. The first one is usually around October 15th, and then the second one is usually around January 5th. And so you'll have to choose one of those deadlines through which to apply to your schools. And the great thing about Consortium is it offers a streamlined application process. Okay. And what that means is that you can apply to all of your member schools at once through one application portal. That means one set of short answers, one time you upload your resume, one time you upload your transcript, and one sliding scale application fee based on how many schools you decide to apply to. Okay. So even if you're not totally sure if you're the ideal candidate for Consortium, if you think that you might be, then definitely, give it a shot, because at any case, you're going to be able to reap these benefits of the streamlined process. And happy to talk about, what the application looks like as well.
Yeah. No, that's terrific. And just so I understand correctly, so you have the consortium application itself, and that is its own application. And the deadline, I think you said, is mid-October. Is that right for it? And then on top of that, though, depending on the schools you are applying to, then do you have their applications as well, or how does that work?
Yeah, so basically, one of the advantages is that you'll be able to apply to all of your schools through one application portal, right? Which means that the school's individual applications, their individual deadlines, those won't apply if you're applying through a consortium. You only have to pay attention to that one deadline, whether it's October 15th or January 5th or whatever it will be in 2024. And so, that's something that makes it easy. You only have to keep track of one portal and deadline. And then in terms of the requirements, it'll have the, your standard personal information, transcript, resume, and then there'll be some essays. The consortium has its own essays. First, there are what's called the core essays usually, and those are essays that both the schools that you're applying to, as well as consortium see. And the first essay is about your career goals, and how you arrived at those goals, and how you plan to fulfill them. And then usually there's an optional essay asking you to address any areas of concern or anything that you feel needs further elaboration. And so again, the schools and the consortium see those. And then the consortium also requires essays, what they call membership essays. And what the membership essays ask you are basically about, how have you demonstrated your commitment to the consortium's mission.
Okay, and that only the consortium sees, or all of the member schools?
So these only the consortium will see, because they are the ones who are, determining whether you are granted membership, and they'll decide, partially on the basis of these essays. And so they ask about your commitment to the mission to date, how you plan to uphold it in business school, and after you graduate. And again, to your point, the schools will not see those essays; only the consortium will see those essays. Then each of the schools, the member schools that you apply to, they will have their own what we call supplemental essays or short answers. Generally, those are pretty similar to what's in their individual applications, but sometimes there's a little bit of variability. And those essays are only seen by the member schools. They are not seen by the consortium.
Okay. No, that makes sense then. Okay, so admittedly, even as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking to myself, why don't I just apply to the consortium if only to get that later due date? Is that an accurate sort of first way of thinking about it?
I mean, it is pretty tempting, right? You don't have to, you do get a later date, especially for round one, right? Or what they call the early round. January 5th, is pretty much in line with the regular round two deadlines. But yeah, that is a benefit, only having to, again, upload your resume once and not,
Right.
5, 6, 7 times. So those are definitely benefits. What I tell people is, take a look at the essays, and if you're thinking, based on the work that I've done, within work, outside of work, if I feel like it's possibly, in line with consortium's mission, if it's served one or more of the target groups, then, go ahead and give it a shot. And then of course you'll reap all of the other benefits of applying through consortium, the streamlined process. So, if you're concerned about, well, is it good enough? Have I done enough to uphold the mission? I would say, and I was actually just telling this to a client earlier today, let the consortium decide, right? So just, put your hat in the ring if you think that there's a chance that, you might be in line with what they're seeking.
No, that makes sense. So, Nisha, let's go one level down on the essays in terms of what have you seen, what has worked, and now just talking about the consortium essays in terms of the membership essays. Just from your perspective, what would demonstrate some of those things that consortium is looking for?
Yeah, absolutely. So in order to show alignment to the consortium's mission, again, you want to show explicitly that your work has benefited one of the 3 target groups that I mentioned. And so, there could be things like being a part of your employer's affinity group. Let's say if you do happen to belong to one of those 3 groups, organizing DEIA panels with representation from those groups, working with, let's say, the community service organization, where, let's say those specifically those member, those groups are the target beneficiaries. I think, those are, some ways in which you can show, demonstration, basically that you demonstrate the mission. But there's definitely a lot of different ways to do it, within work, outside of work. The things you did in college are also fair game.
Right. No, that makes sense. And recognizing that you've worked with all sorts of different clients, all different backgrounds, all different experiences, could you give us just a couple of examples of people who really feel like they captured the mission and were, in fact, accepted into Consortium?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been lucky to work with a lot of different consortium clients. So for example, I worked with one who, he was the president of the Black Students Association, at school. And so in his case, he was, a member of that group and, very specifically did work to, benefit that target population. I worked with, somebody else who she worked with a community service organization that very much benefited Hispanic Americans, and so that was outside of work, right? But it was community service involvement. I mentioned a DEI panel that's directly based on another client that I work with. They organize DEIA panels. During one was for Juneteenth. There was one where it featured Hispanics, Latinos. And their particular journey at work. Those are just a few. And so there's again a variety of ways to show demonstration of the mission.
I'm gonna throw something at you from a couple years ago, and I think you read his essay. Again, here at mbaMission, we pass around essays quite a bit. I had a client who actually did successfully get a diversity. Because of some of their work with diversity, they actually did get a consortium scholarship. He himself was not one of these member groups. However, his profession was actually helping Native American casinos, and it goes back a few years ago. And honestly, the thing that he talked a lot about is just the impact Native American casinos had been, to the community. And his big point was around the fact that most of these Native American casinos are not actually particularly operationally well run. The communities that they're supposed to serve are probably not getting enough money. And we did its entire application about that.
Oh, wow.
And this one worked out and ended up working out, but just as sort of an indication of folks who, again, are maybe coming at the consortium from sideways, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a terrific example. And actually, yes, that does ring a bell.
Yeah.
And what's important there is that your client was able to show how he specifically benefited a group, right? He didn't talk in general about how he upheld the consortium's mission or promoted diversity. He said, in my case, it is the Native American population, and this is how the work clearly has benefited them, and gave specific examples. And that's what made it so effective.
No, that makes sense. Whenever we hear specificity, and I'll circle back to one of the most early questions of the consortium application, it's always this notion of career path, career goals. And Nisha, when someone comes to you and says, oh, how do I even write a career path? I don't know what I want to do. And that's such a core question. What do you tell that person who says, hey, I'm going to business school to figure things out?
Yeah, what I tell them is, on one hand, yes, things could change when you get to business school, and, nobody's expected to know exactly, what they want to do. On the other hand, things move really quickly at school. And so you can't, necessarily spend 2 years figuring out, right? As soon as you get to campus, within, it seems like a month, companies are coming to do presentations, there's resume drops, there's, workshops on consulting, you name it. And so for that reason, the schools want to know that you have a decent idea of what you're thinking about pursuing, right? Even though that plan can change. And in particular, they really want to know, what does that short-term goal look like? What do you want to do after graduation, maybe for the next few years after that? And so, for someone who's not sure what they want to do, I would encourage them to do that reflection. Think about what are the elements of their job they enjoy, what are the things they would like to do more of, and what have been some of the professional and even personal experience that they've had that have made them realize, what type of impact they want to make in the future.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. invariably one of the biggest things that I will say my clients, I think our clients generally have, is that first notion of specificity.
Yeah.
With this notion here, and it's not unusual for me to get a client based on my background who says, "Oh, I want to be an entrepreneur." And the reality is that doesn't mean anything, right? I want to be an entrepreneur. It's like it just doesn't mean anything. So I always push people, what type of entrepreneur, exactly startup and that sort of thing. Yeah.
Exactly. They want to be able to talk about, is there a particular problem, that they want to solve, for example, or have they had other ventures and what's that experience taught them? Those might be a couple of questions they might consider.
No question about it. So, Nisha, picking back up with the consortium, so you decide to apply a bunch of schools. At that point, it sounds like you have to do supplemental essays for each school that you're applying to.
Yes.
And those essays, are they the same as the school essays for non-consortium folks, or are they completely different essays?
Yeah, they're generally the same as the essays for non-consortium folks. Occasionally, they might not require one of the supplemental essays. So, for example, if a school has an essay that asks about career goals but not why that program? Well, Consortium, one of its core essays asks about career goals too. So occasionally, the school might say, okay, well, you wrote it for Consortium, so that's good. A lot of the times, though, it's the exact same essays that the schools individually require.
Yeah, perfect. So just to sort of pull it all together here, Nisha, I come to you and I say, I've heard about this thing, Consortium. What will you tell me in terms of the program itself, how I should approach it, just what next steps would look like from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I would say, first of all, it's a fantastic organization, right, with a really, really important mission. And I would ask them about various experiences they've had in their professional and personal life to see, has their experience directly benefited one of the consortium's target populations, right? That's the important part. And if you feel like, there's enough there, to talk about, then I would, very much encourage them to apply through the consortium, right? By doing so, they'll get the streamlined application process. They'll be able to apply to, a number of member schools at once. And of course, they'll make themselves eligible for consortium membership, which includes a lot of great networking opportunities, as well as, possibly the fellowship dollars. And those are always nice.
That's great. Always nice. Well, Nisha, thanks very much for joining me here today to talk about the consortium. And by all means, I'd love to have you back on the podcast at some point soon.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks again for having me.
Great. Thanks again. It's Harold Szymanski and Nisha Tremetti here at mbaMission.
Thanks for listening to the mbaMission podcast. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts so you don't miss an episode. We wish you the best of luck with your MBA applications and look forward to helping you on your journey to business school.